All right, welcome back to H-TownStories. I'm your host, Nick Ramirez. Quick, selfish plug. Follow my Instagram page, H-TownStories, all lowercase. Thank you guys for listening. And now that I got that out of the way, my guest today is Miss Adrian Moore.
Hi.
And she likes to party like it's 1999.
Oh, sweet Jesus. Hello.
My fake applause as always. So the thing that I wanted to, I always open up with just normal conversation to kind of relax us and get in before we get into it. And the craziest thing happened to us the other day on Tuesday. It was a random Tuesday. We come back from the in-laws house. We're driving down the street and we hit the corner and there's another SUV that comes swinging. And I'm talking like you can just see the arc of his turn. And he comes barreling down the road at least, he's in a residential area, so it's at least 45 miles an hour or higher that he's flying down, and he comes within inches of running straight into us. So I almost died on Tuesday.
Woohoo.
Yeah. And it was crazy to think about because he kept pulling, he kept coming straight towards us, and I turned straight into a corner and I kind of whipped it right at the last second, and he just bumped me and gave me a little kiss on the back of my bumper.
Oh, he actually made contact.
Yeah, he made contact because he swerved because there was a car right behind me, a little Honda Civic, and he swerved out of the way just in time to not hit the Civic behind me. Fished up, we bumped each other and just kissed, and he gave me like a little scratch on there. I don't know where he went. He ran off.
That sucks.
Yes, and so this guy is probably a plant worker. Nothing against plant workers, but there's been plant workers that have been sitting and gathering at these gas stations nearby because they can't go to the bars. So they just sit outside the gas station and they're drinking. And, it was like 9 o'clock. So this guy probably got off at 6, had more than enough, obviously. And then the craziest part is the Honda behind me. This guy gets off. He's tatted down. He's like the, typical guy that just comes out. He's like, hey, did you get the license plate? And I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't have time to get the license plate.
I'm trying to save my family.
Yeah. I'm not a trained officer. I can't just read that quickly.
Like, did you get it? You were the one who wasn't getting
you
hit.
had more time. But it was just crazy. It was fascinating to me because in a blink of an eye, like the car, if he would have hit us, it would have just knocked out me. Like there was, my wife and my son were on the other side, on the other side of the car, basically, and they couldn't. Like, if he would have hit me, it would have just tore up my side of the car, and so it just, I'm thankful that I would have died, which sounds crazy,
but still, if you would have died, they'd have to witness it.
Yeah, but I have my life insurance policy, and that was the first question my wife asked me. I'm on there, right, in the beneficiary, right?
I always tell my husband with all the crap that goes on with me, I'm like, you've upped your insurance, right? Just to make sure you and Ava and everyone's covered.
Are you at 100,000 or are you at 200,000? How much are you worth now?
We may need to up it just a little bit.
Have you ever had any near-death experiences like that?
Not necessarily like near death, just my car accident that was, crazy and painful.
We'll get into that in a little bit, but
no, I've never like nearly died. No. And if I did, I was like maybe too shocked to even comprehend what was happening, you know? So I'm sure, but
it is scary because it wasn't like my life passed before my eyes or anything. It was just react and get out of the way. And that was it. And that's why I was like, there was no moment where I was like, oh my God, I remember that when I was 2. Like, no, it wasn't any of that. It was
you didn't see like, in movies, the scenes of your life flashing. You didn't see any of that.
nothing like that. And I was like, nope. But it was just, it was scary, but it was also one of those moments that I couldn't even think about like what would have happened. Just, all right, let's just move on from this because, but obviously I'm still thinking about it.
You can sit and dwell on it if you let yourself, you know?
Can. There's people like, what is it? Like future tripping. I think that's the term I've heard where you could have, the could-haves and the what-ifs could have gotten to you.
And then you picture your life like afterwards if something happened, like what your wife and kid are going to grow up like.
Oh my God. Is she going to get married to this? What does the second husband look like?
I told Dave that, if anything happens to me, he's just going to have to be single the rest of his life.
Oh my God. Is that every woman? Because my wife told me the same thing. You're not getting married again, are you, right?
I joke. I mean, if he finds someone, fine, but I don't think he'll find anyone as amazing as me. So we'll see.
That's that budding confidence.
Yeah.
So we'll start off with, all right, so we'll start off and we'll get into it with, where'd you grow up at?
I grew up in Pasadena.
Pasadena,
and I went to private school up until 8th grade. Zion Lutheran. It's now a Sears over in Pasadena.
Wait.
Well, it's across from the Walmart. It used to be Sears. Off of Main Street, like Shaver, Southmore, that area.
Okay.
There's a Walmart there.
Yes.
Across the street is the church. And it's now a Spanish church. And that was where I went to school.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Courtney.
I know exactly right where you're at.
Went there too.
Courtney went to that school too?
Yeah.
What?
And my dad.
Wow, so that's a small world. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. You're able to go to private school. Any difference? Like, what was the difference you could say since you went to private school and now you teach in a public school? What's some of the differences you've seen?
There was more teaching involved in a private school. As a teacher, looking at my teachers and what they did and stuff, I think there was more flexibility. As a student, I think that, I mean, we had kids who had tough lives.
Yeah.
But overall, not like what we
between.
see in like a lower socioeconomic school, like a Title I school. But I don't know. I mean, looking back, I was in a shell. Like I was just like in this bubble and kind of was naive to the world and stuff. Because I mean, I went from there to Sam Rayburn. Yeah. And
Sam
like,
Rayburn's not a bad school, but it just opened your eyes.
Back then it wasn't a bad school, but it was just so many people. Like I had like 22 kids in my 8th grade class to like almost 2,000 in my freshman class.
Wow.
So there were tiers. There were, you know, I memorized the map of the school so I would know where to go because we didn't even have a cafeteria.
Oh my God,
We didn't switch classes. We had recess up until like through 8th grade. Like
you had recess at 8th grade?
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
So you had that freedom. It was 15, 20 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was just you still had that freedom at
In
8th
8th grade. Yeah.
Wow, that's such a relaxed.
It was. And, you know, looking back, I'm like, man, that was amazing. But then looking back on my high school years, it was a lot of fun.
Wait, why?
And I made a lot of friends. And I was friends with different groups.
Oh, that is the best, being friends with different groups.
And I mean, at Zion, I was just, for the most part, it was the boys that I was there the longest with. And it was like 1st grade through 8th grade. So we were like brothers and sisters, you know?
That's the good thing about private school. You get really bonded to your
It's
to your
good,
peers.
but it's weird if you have a crush on a boy and you're like, wait a minute, he's kind of like my brother. So I don't think that's normal. So
I mean, it's normal some places.
Yeah, but not here. So, yeah, it was definitely eye-opening and nerve-wracking. But then once I got into the groove of public school, it was great.
One of my wife's cousins grew up and went to private school, and she said that she called the regular kids that go to public school normies.
No, that's weird.
Yeah, I was like gonna say, did y'all have any nicknames y'all gave regular quote unquote?
We didn't even think about it. Like, we really didn't. And the good part is I grew up in church. And so a lot of the people that went to my church also went to Rayburn, went to Bondi, went to all those schools.
Oh, okay.
So when I got to Rayburn, it's not like I didn't know anybody. Like I had a close group of friends who kind of helped guide me, you know? But I never thought of them as being different. I mean, I just thought they were at their school, I was at mine, you know?
Maybe it's a different time. Maybe they understand their privilege at that.
Maybe.
At that school.
Maybe.
When she said, "Oh yeah, the normies over there," I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
That makes me think of like a private school person being like stuck up and they're just like higher, you know, holier, righteous, and no, it was not like that at all. Because I mean, we had some kids who got expelled from all the public schools, and so they had to come to our school. So we had some issues.
Oh wow, I didn't even think about that. So
yeah,
the kids
I mean,
that get kicked out of all those schools have to go to a private school now.
Yeah, I mean, where else were they go? Because they didn't have like a big charter school, you know.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't
not
a
the way
thing.
They have it now.
Yeah.
There's charter schools every freaking block.
Yeah. So there was private schools that they went to.
Wow.
So
I was under the impression blindly that most private schools have like 0%.
I'm sure there are some.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at where my private school was,
well, yeah.
I mean,
it is in a.
It's not like it's in
now.
like West U or River Oaks or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was not the best neighborhood back then, but it was a great school. And because my dad went there and grew up through there, they wanted me to do that as well. And that was like my grandfather's dream, was for me to go to Zion.
Oh,
and
so continue a family tradition in a way.
And he passed away right about a year before I was supposed to start.
Oh man.
So yeah, but we did it, and it was a great experience. I wouldn't change it for anything.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah.
That's cool. So you grew up in a private school, and then you switched over in high school. And what was that like, switching over in high school? 22 people to over 2,000.
Like the teachers switched classes at Zion, and then
the way we're doing now.
Huh?
The way we're doing it now.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that's how it was. Yeah.
What?
And so going to Rayburn, where I had to like figure out how to use a locker because we didn't have those.
That was something that you struggled with?
Yeah. I mean, if I look back, I'd probably never really used like a lock like that until high school. Wow. So I, like the whole week before school started, like practiced opening my lock because I was like, I can't get screwed and be late to class because of this damn lock.
Did you ever actually use your locker though?
Yeah, I did.
Oh man, I never used my locker. No, it was because my classes were all over of the campus, so you only had like
That's true.
10 minutes I think to get to each class.
And see, with Rayburn, it's more like now it's obviously they've added on, but the main building is like a big giant square.
Oh, okay.
So it was easy to navigate.
No, ours was like Tetris. It just kept adding
on.
We'll add a wing here, we'll add a wing here, we'll add a wing here.
Rayburn was definitely easy to navigate. I mean, I had classes out in the portables, but it still wasn't like spread out. It was all kind of in one central location. So it wasn't too bad.
Did you have posters of people inside your
you
your
know what?
locker?
I don't even think I decorated my locker ever. It was just there for storage and that was it. Like I could care less. I didn't even think I had a mirror in my locker.
You told me a story about a high school creep. You mind sharing that story?
Yes. He who shall not be named.
We should name him and drag him and me to him.
I'm better than that. I am a better person than that. He was my first experience with, I guess, kind of being sexually harassed. It was algebra. I remember the teacher. I remember where we sat. And every day he would make a comment about my breasts. And when was he going to get to see them? And all this crude, just blatant comments about them. And so finally it got to the point where I told the teacher, I was like, look, either we switch classes, he gets out, or we move, separate, whatever, or I'm going to have to go to admin because it's getting ridiculous and uncomfortable. And
what was you had told me specifically one of the phrases that he says. What was one of the phrases that you remember ringing through your ears?
When do I get to see your tits?
But the audacity, as a guy, I have 2 older sisters, but, as most guys, we're not put in that situation where we understand, like, where we're being looked at like a piece of meat. Yeah. Like, that sounds terrible, but, if y'all guys listen to the previous episode or the episode before that, I can't remember where it's at, but, I spoke with somebody that said that she was on a date with somebody, and the guy just whipped their dick out in the car and was like, hey, give me a blowjob. And you're like...
what the hell, dude?
Yeah, how do you do that? So I'm sure some guy listening is like, yeah, I just ask. But whip it out and ask. Like the aggressiveness of these guys to do that. And
I'm not a huge feminine. I mean, whatever. If I lived back in the 50s and I was a housewife, I'd be perfectly content, But when it comes to stuff like that, it's just like, what I want to know what goes through their mind when they think it's appropriate to say stuff like that. Like, who raised you?
Yes.
And he thought his shit did not stink. And I'm just like, dude, you're not even that good looking.
But the aggressiveness behind it, like the teacher didn't hear any of this, never heard it.
No, it was always before class started. Yeah, and she never heard until I brought it up to her attention. And she moved us. We didn't go through the hassle of changing schedules, but I didn't care as long as I didn't have to sit next to him. Yeah. So she kept us separated, and it was fine after that. And I avoided him.
And he never harassed anybody else, as far as you
I'm
know?
sure he did. And it wouldn't surprise me if he still does.
Oh man.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of those when we get together, the girls that we all went to high school together. He's one that we always shit talk about. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Years later. So guys, if you're in high school listening to this and you're the creeper, you're going to be always the creeper. You're always going to be the creeper in somebody's mind.
Change your ways now before it's too late.
You told me about how you got pregnant at 18.
Mm-hmm. Luckily, thankfully, I was out of high school. I was not that statistic, just, teenage pregnancy. No, that happened my freshman year of college. Mm-hmm. And I dated a guy very briefly and ended up getting pregnant. And we had already stopped dating when I found out. It was that brief. It was that brief. And then I found out I was pregnant after we kind of stopped dating, talking, whatever. Yeah.
So then when you found out you were pregnant, how did you tell your parents?
Well, before I even told them and before I even got pregnant, I was always like, you know what? I could easily have an abortion. No one has to know and be done with it. My little secret that I don't share with anybody. Yeah. But as soon as I saw the stick with those lines, I was like, I can't do that. That's out of the question. So it was either keep it or give it up for adoption.
Yeah.
So I was with my very good friend, and we did the pregnancy test and at her house. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to tell my parents. I didn't want to wait because I'm not good with, stuff like that. I get very anxious and I want to throw up all the time. I couldn't do that to myself, Mm-hmm. And so I wrote my mom a letter.
Oh, how poetic of you.
I know, right? That's the teacher in me. I wrote my mom a letter, told her that at the time my cousin lived in California, and my mom was very big in the church, at our church. Mm-hmm. Everyone knew her. She was lay leader, so it was like the pastors, and then she was like the leader of the congregation, so she was up there. And I told her that I would move to California with April, my cousin, because I didn't want to embarrass her or my family. And as soon as I had the baby, if I gave it up for adoption, I'd do it out there and come home. And it was just, I went to go live with her for a year and just to kind of, live life. That's how we would phrase it, So I went to the church to find our associate pastor because her and my mom are friends. Of course, she wasn't there. So I called my mom from the church. I'm like, hey, can you come meet me up here? So I'm in the sanctuary. I'm like, she can't kill me in God's house. So
she's going to try. She's going to try. The thought will pass to her mind. But she's going to,
we will be in this holy room and she can't do it there. And I'm like kneeling at the altar, crying, just waiting. I mean, I just didn't know what was going to happen. And I'm facing like the cross at the front. And I hear in the back, you're pregnant. And I was like, yes, I didn't have to tell her.
The grace of God spoke to her and let her know.
But he did. Like all throughout the few days before, it kept popping in her head. What if Adrian gets pregnant? What would you do if she got pregnant?
Wow.
And so by then, when I called her and had her meet me at the church, like on a random weekday, she knew something was up. And she had a feeling that was God, like preparing her, And so I told her, and I was like, yeah, I am. And so I gave her the note, and she's like, well, that's not going to happen. You're not moving to California.
Wait, when you gave her the note, she read it right there in front of you? Oh, for that's how intimidating that is. Were you sweating bullets? Were you nervous?
Dude, I was crying.
The whole time she's reading?
Well, yeah. I'm like giving her this news that is like completely life-changing for all of us. Because obviously I'm not on my own. I was still living with them, and I couldn't support myself, much less a kid at 18. So, I mean, all I could do was just sit there while she read it. And she's like, okay. She's like, let's go tell your dad. I was like, oh, shit.
Was it the same day?
We went from the church to the house.
Oh, man.
And so my dad, he worked nights with the Chronicle. And so he was laying in bed, getting up from sleeping. And I can't remember if we gave him the note or if I just told him. But either way, he just held me. I laid next to him, and we just both kind of cried. And
wow.
I mean, there was no negative comments, thoughts, or anything like that. But it was devastating, obviously. But it was one of those that we're going to get through it.
Yeah.
It's just, how it's going to work out, we don't know, So I went and had my first ultrasound and saw the heartbeat and decided I was going to keep it.
Wow. And it is scary. 18 years old.
Yeah, I was 19 when I had him.
Your whole world changes. You've had to break the news to your parents. And, it's scary. It is really scary, especially with the world. Like, your whole world changes abruptly, just done, over. How did the donor feel?
I told him next.
Did you write him a poetic love letter?
No, I just told him. He was not the love of my life at all. I didn't even really tolerate him by that point. Like, I just... And so I told him, and he's like, okay. And we didn't really talk about it. I was like, I'm keeping it. And I think, I was refusing to let him have an out. My thought was, if I have to go through this crap, he has to as well.
And this realization came later in life.
Yeah. I was about maybe 8 months pregnant when I finally went to the Attorney General's office to get child support and all that, like talk about that and stuff. And so, or maybe it was sooner. It's been like almost 21 years. That's hard to remember exactly when. But he was like, well, maybe we shouldn't do this. When I told him about like how child support would work and all this stuff. And I was like,
I mean, that's scary for any guy to have to go through child support. I mean, your income, how much is the percentage? Isn't like 20%, 10%?
20 or 25.
And so you just, you make $100, $25 automatically goes straight to your kid.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, dude, I mean, the cost of having a kid is very significant.
And his little bit that we did get didn't cover a whole lot. You know, I mean, it was very just clothes money for Parker, things like that. It didn't, help with school because he went into preschool and all that stuff. It was more making him responsible for it. That's how I see it. Looking back and after all the crap I had to deal with, I almost wish I would have let him sign his rights away. I think.
Would you have even in hindsight not done through the attorney general and forcing him to pay child support and rather have him and like you two come into an agreement, or like you wouldn't trust him to do that?
I wouldn't trust him to do that. At least with the attorney generals, it kind of held him somewhat accountable. I mean, he did what the paperwork said. Yeah. Came on his every other weekend. We were flexible here and there, but I think, I don't know. Sometimes I wish we would have just been done and it'd just be me and Parker. Would he have,
do you think in hindsight he would have done the same thing, or?
I think he would have been okay with it.
Wow. That's devastating to hear though.
Now though, I mean now.
The situation's changed.
It's changed. But back then, when it first all went down, I think he would have done it easily.
That's crazy though. Just to think about, like, there's parents out there now that have signed their rights away and don't have a chance to get back to them, and that's just a scary thing to think about because you have a part of yourself walking out there, and the fact that you want to walk away from it or not be a part of that person's life, is just scary to think about it, especially with my son being 11 months at this time right now. Like, I couldn't imagine not wanting to be a part of his life.
That was one of the reasons why adoption was out, because I couldn't go through life wondering what he was doing. How did he look?
Oh my God, I didn't even think about it that way.
I mean, obviously there's open adoption now, but if I didn't choose that, I mean,
you could have just been.
What does his voice sound like? Things like that.
That's like, that's such a like. Oh my
it's heartbreaking.
God. Yeah, you don't think about those
But
things.
you know what? The women who do give their child up for adoption, and I respect the hell out of them. Yeah. Because more than likely, their relationship, that were their circumstances, that was their only choice. And, respect for them for not aborting. Mm-hmm. Respect for them for, being the bigger person and knowing I can't take care of this child right now. If they were a victim of rape, carrying that baby to term, knowing how it was conceived, and then, giving it a life that the baby deserves. Yeah. I mean, so much respect for women who do that.
There's just so many things that you don't think about when it comes to the abortion laws. And like, just like with those laws that are happening, I think it was like Alabama and all these other places where, like, if somebody does get raped and they have a child produced from that, like, they're required, supposedly according to law, that to make that to have that child. Like, that, it's scary to think that, like, and most of those people that are coming up with those laws are guys. They're not ladies. They're not people that have been through that stuff to understand what it is to go through that and to carry like this. Like, and it must feel like this demon seed that's inside of you.
I can imagine.
Oh, this is crazy.
I can imagine. But then I also couldn't imagine aborting it either. I'm very pro-life.
You are?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to me, there's always another way. There's always another option. I'm proof of that. And before I got pregnant, being a little teenager girl, I could abort it, be fine. No big deal. But when I, like I said, when I saw that positive test, I knew there was life in me. Yeah. Whether it had arms or legs or not, I didn't care. I knew something was growing and living inside me.
I had this conversation with this lady just yesterday. Her name's Elizabeth Green. I doubt she'll listen to it. She's 61 years old. I'm out there getting my oil changed, and I just started asking her questions, just, shooting the breeze, and we're talking, and she's 61, and her son is 22 years old.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So I was like, I was like, how do I tread this question?
That's like the opposite of me with Parker.
So I found out that she shared the story with me that she at the age of 22, she was told she would never be able to have kids, and at 39, after taking all these, she took these hormones to balance her out for years, from 22 to 39. And then at 39, she decided to stop taking them because she's like, well, I'm not going to have a kid. It's fine. 6 months later, she gets pregnant.
Oh my God.
So, it's, whatever choice you decide to make, whether to have the kid, abort the kid, or, adopt the kid, it's a tough decision on either part.
Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong way.
No.
Like, for those of you out there maybe screaming at her for being pro-life.
No, and my thing
like
is,
that.
if someone does choose to have an abortion,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to look down on them. I'm not going to, if it's a friend of mine who chooses that, I will be there for them. It's just maybe I'm more pro-life for myself.
Yeah.
Do I think that there's, that's not the only option? Of course, but I'm not going to look down on someone who chooses that. And I may have friends who I've met, in the past few years who have had it, and I just don't know.
And you don't know.
And that's fine. I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not going to hold it against someone if that's what they choose.
Yeah.
For me, it was not an option for me. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it is a tough choice. You have no idea what the person is going through. You have no idea. It's this righteousness of people being like, this is what you should have done.
Right. No.
It doesn't. It's just a tough decision going on through this.
Everyone's circumstance is so different from the next. And
so you tell him, you go through the attorney general. He starts paying child support. And what is life like at 18 years old and having a son?
Well, I had him at 19.
19. Okay, 19.
I turned 19 when I was pregnant. I had a lot of help with my parents because they worked from home pretty much. Like my dad would go in because they were distributors for the paper. So my dad would go in at 2 or 3 in the morning. Mom would stay home and do the billing and all that stuff. So her hours were completely flexible.
Oh, as long as she got the work done.
Exactly. So I had a lot of help, and they were like, I worked for them. I helped with sending out bills, things like that. Not a whole lot, but I was on their payroll because we were like, we could get a bigger house, but your mom is one that would take over. And my dad, and they were like,
down and had this conversation.
They both did. And they're like, because they brought this to me. They were like, my mom was like, I would take over.
So your mom admitted this?
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful to hear though. Really.
No, yeah. She completely owned it because that's just her nature.
Yeah.
And she's like, and you would let me because that's my nature,
Oh, someone else is going to take care of me? Okay.
Win-win. So they were like, we're talking about maybe getting you an apartment.
Wow.
And so we ended up doing that. I moved in there before I had Parker so I could get settled and stuff. So they were like, your main job is to get through school. They're like, we will do whatever it takes to help out with that. So I ended up I had him in December. So I ended up having to take that semester off because of not complications, but I had some issues. And then I took the semester off after that.
What kind of issues did you have?
Just like the high blood pressure, stress. It landed me in the hospital a couple of times. So I just, I finished some classes, but some of them I had to drop. But I took, I had him in mid-December, and I took until August.
Oh, wow. So you took a year gap, basically, almost.
Almost a year, yeah. I did go work at Old Navy just to have extra money and just to get out of the house and have a break, But that August after I had him is when I went back and, started taking classes. I took, 15, 18 hours a semester.
Wow. Everything you could to try to finish.
Yeah. It still took me a while, but I got it done. I went, got my associates at San Jack and then moved on to U of H Clear Lake. And it was kind of cool, when I graduated with my bachelor's, looking up and seeing Parker up there cheering me on, It was a cool moment. So
when you graduated, he was probably 3, 4?
He was he was 4. Wow. 4, yeah.
So then, so your parents, just being able to have the access for your parents to help you with the apartment and have your own separate living, that's such a blessing.
Oh, completely. And because I'm an only child, so everyone thinks you're spoiled. I like to say I was just well taken care of. But had I had brothers or sisters, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
No.
It wouldn't have been possible. So it kind of was like it was just like, it was a blessing. I couldn't have done it without them at all, because I mean, they were it. Like, I didn't have a brother or sister help out.
Yeah.
My grandmother couldn't drive. So, I mean, she would come over. I would pick her up and she would come over. And if I had to take care of homework or whatever, she would sit with Parker and play with him. But really, it was my parents that did it for me. And we had, when I went through U of H, and we had some church friends who would help out. And I'd drop Parker off on the way to class. And it really was a village,
Yeah.
It ended up being a village, but my parents were definitely the main source of help.
That's great though, because with us having a son, it does take a village. You don't realize how much you need to accept people's help. I think that comes with age, being able to realize that, like, it's okay if I need help, and not being so arrogant of like, I can do all this by myself, because nobody can do everything.
No. Once I graduated, like, I started teaching, and that was Parker's first, like, kindergarten.
Oh, wow.
So we were kind of starting fresh together, and I still needed my parents' help, but not quite as much, because he was at school with me, things like that. So it was still hard for me to ask for help for people outside of the village that we had already set up, and like, I would have friends who'd volunteer to babysit. I'm like, you don't have to do that. They're like, but we want to. And so it was hard for me to accept and be okay with that, not because I didn't trust them, just I didn't want to I felt like a burden to them. I didn't want to, and they were volunteering the whole time, but
still, you don't want to, like you said, it is a burden. Like, it does feel like a burden, because for people that don't have kids, when I'm sure maybe your friends did, they have kids,
nope.
And so they, for them to not have kids and then take care of a kid, you don't know how their demeanor is going to be. You don't know if they're going to be able to handle it.
Yeah, and with them, my friends were very involved in Parker's life, so that was good. I trusted them with him, but I just didn't want to. I didn't want them to feel like they had to do it.
Like, you didn't want to feel like you were asking for a handout.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Kinda. Yeah.
It is. That's scary. It is scary.
It is. It is. But like, I wouldn't have been able to do it without it. Yeah. I couldn't have.
All the hands that you have to help you. It's just, like you said, it's just by the grace of God that people give you that help.
And my parents were really good about, like, every weekend I had a night that I could go out. They would watch Parker overnight, because they're like, you're still young.
Yeah.
You need to have that social life. I'd make the most of that night. But, and then, I'd be back to being a mom.
Yeah.
But it was nice that they gave me that. They didn't have to do any of that, because they were helping during the week too.
It sounds like you had some really well-rounded parents that understood the complexities of, and being okay with you being, first of all, making peace with you having a child at that young of an age. And then being able to realize that, like, if we don't allow her to have this, it's going to come back. It manifests in some other way.
I could have just been like, F it, I'm out.
Yeah.
And then just gone crazy. You just don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. But they knew that I needed a night out. They knew I needed time to not be mommy and to be Adrian. So they were great. They still are.
That's great, though, because there's a lot of parents probably now that are like, oh, you had a kid, you're forced to do that now. That's it. And it's like a punishment. And I get it. You got to take care of your kid. But like you said, like, if you don't allow that out, what would have happened when he did get to school? And you're like, I don't have to watch him for a little bit. You just go crazy.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. I don't think that would have happened. I know myself.
I hope not.
But you just never know what's going to happen. And and it made their relationship with Parker very special. Like, they helped raise him. Like, my dad saw Parker every day for the first 2 years of his life.
Wow.
Yeah. So, they have a bond, not a normal. Now it's kind of, worked its way out. But when Parker was little and stuff, they just had this special bond that sadly they didn't have with Ava. But I don't want to say they're working on it. They have a bond with her. It's just different with Parker.
It is. Well, think about, like, at that young of an age, they needed to be as hands-on as possible.
And seeing with Ava, I had Dave, her dad. So we did that together. We were our own little family. And my parents were an actual grandparent figure. So it's different. Me and Dave bonded with Ava. and we took care of everything. So it's a special, different relationship that I don't want to sound like that they don't love Ava or they don't spend as much time with her.
Yeah.
They do. They love her completely.
But the situation was different. You were in a different point in your life. You were already married. You already have your husband. You're going through life in a stable way
with him.
basically.
Yeah.
And you didn't need them to be as involved as you needed them to be.
Exactly. I didn't have to depend on them. I depended on him, which was kind of weird. That was weird too.
Was it to be able to learn how to depend on your husband?
Well, go through that, because I went through all of it by myself, you know, like, and then to have someone with me, it was weird, but it was great. Like, it was so much better, obviously, but it was just, it was different having, like, when I had Parker and I was going through labor and delivery, my mom was with me, you know. This time I made her sit out and Dave was there. So, I mean, it was just little things like that just made it different. But, I mean, I wouldn't change it, obviously.
Well, yeah. Well, it sounds like this. I mean, that is a special bond to have with your grandparents. Like from somebody that didn't have grandparents on either side. I didn't need to know them. Like on my mom's side, I knew my grandfather, but like I've always said, like I think I could put it 10 times. I think I've seen him in his life before he passed away. And he passed away when I was in 10th grade.
That's crazy. My grandmother lived next door to us.
Yeah, so I didn't have like where I could go to grandma's. I can go to grandpa's. When my grandmother, because my grandfather got remarried on my mom's side. But my actual grandmother passed away in like 80 something. She had a brain aneurysm, just complained of a headache, went upstairs and was dead before 12 basically.
Wow.
And then on my father's side, he was kind of the black sheep of the family, so we didn't really know them on who they were. So we were just kind of felt lost like when I started looking at it. So now when I see my son with his grandparents, I'm like, you know, that's awesome. Like I'm glad that he has that bond, because I would have never I never got to experience that. So it's great for him, and it sounds like it's like you and like Parker and his grandparents have that same kind of bond.
And see, like with me growing up, like my grandfather died when I was like 5, and he and I were very close. So my grandma moved next door to us. So I practically lived next door to my grandma. So I'm sure, being a parent now, I'm like, dude, that's so awesome.
It is.
I want that.
Look, all right. There was a one point where this house next to us was on sale. And I was like, babe, why don't you tell your parents to move there? And she was like, that's too close. I was like, you know what? Like, because in my mind, I'm thinking of all the experiences that I missed out that I could give to my son, of like him just having them there. In hindsight, it probably is too close, but it doesn't really matter, because there's still,
You'd be amazed at how awesome it is. And like, we're looking at houses now for my parents to live with us. Yeah. So I'm like, yes.
I've said that several times. I've told that to my in-laws. Look, you have like, I think it's for one, it's cost effective.
Yeah.
I mean, but when you look at like other countries, like Italy, like China, basically wherever the coronavirus spread like crazy.
It's because they all live together.
But they do. And it's you have built-in childcare.
But what's crazy is like every realtor or every home builder we talk to and tell them what's going on, they're like, it's happening more and more these days. Like more families are all moving in together, like parents, you know, grandparents, and it's becoming more and more common. And we're doing it because my parents are getting older. Yeah. You know, but it's also nice that, you know, Ava's at an age where she's going to be 12. I mean, she's older too, so she's easy to take care of. So it's, hey, me and Dave are going to go to dinner, just the two of us. We'll see you later, you know, and not feel guilty because they don't have to do anything to entertain her, you know, just make sure she doesn't burn the house down. That's pretty much it. But
it's convenience. It's you end up, like I said, from somebody that didn't grow up with that experience, like you get this wealth of knowledge where, you know, you have your grandparents. That's a whole nother, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I love doing this podcast. You have a whole nother access of wealth.
I couldn't imagine, like my last living grandparent passed away during when we were in the pandemic and stuff. He just a few months ago passed away.
Oh my gosh.
And you know, I'm 40. So I had all those years of having my grandparents, you know? So I couldn't imagine not having grandparents.
Yeah. So I know we've got way off track. Okay. But we'll go back to going back to public school. So
yes.
You graduate and you go you get pregnant, and so you go into college. And what college did you end up going to? U of H.
U of H Clear Lake, yeah.
Clear Lake. You graduate with your degree in teaching, and you start teaching at 22?
Oh no, I was older. I was like, well, not older, but it was like 25.
25.
Because I took that year off or so, and yeah, it was 25.
So then you shared with me about a story about almost losing your father at 23. So this was mid-college.
This was during, U of H time.
So if you can share that story with us.
The week prior, a friend of mine, his dad passed away from a heart attack. And I remember him saying that he didn't have chest pains, his shoulders hurt, and he was burping a lot. So me and my mom were out. We were at a friend's house, not too far from where they lived. And he calls my mom. He's like, hey, I don't feel very good. I don't know if, because he went to eat catfish earlier. He's like, I don't know if that's it, but could you come home? And he's not one to really say that. Like, he'll deal with it. So the friend, Parker was with us. So the friend said, hey, he can stay here. Y'all go check on your dad. And so he was burping a lot, like really big belches. And his shoulders were hurting. And I was like, I pulled mom aside. I was like, I think he's having a heart attack. And she wasn't quite sure. We had a friend who was a nurse. And so she came over and she was like, yeah, let's maybe go ahead and take him. And so he was like, well, I'm not calling an ambulance because I don't want to go to Bayshore because I'll die. He's like, once you go with
the ambulance bill, what are you talking about?
That too. But he's like, once you go there, you don't come back. So I drove him to Southeast Memorial and we get him there. He's hooked up. Mom's filling out paperwork. And all of a sudden, all these nurses and stuff rush in. And he's kind of sweating. And he was like, we were like, what's going on? She's like, well, he's having a heart attack. Like, right there.
And like, but he's not killed over. He's not.
Nope.
He's
like sitting there. He was just sitting there. Yeah. I mean, he said he felt weird. He was sweating a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was having it. And so they kept him there. They ran tests and, they were like, we're gonna take you to Methodist Hospital. And his arteries and stuff, he had one that was blocked, I think maybe at 90%, 95%, and the rest were completely blocked. Like, they were like, you shouldn't be alive right now. You shouldn't be walking around. There's no reason why you should still be on this earth with all your blockages. Like, it was bad.
Wow.
So, and he's still, awake, talking, making jokes.
What?
Yeah. And so we take him, like, the next day or two, we take him to Methodist. Like, he goes by ambulance and we follow. And his doctor there was like, you have to have bypass surgery. So he had a quadruple bypass. Wow. And, we're there waiting hours and hours. He comes out. Everything looks great. He's doing well. You can see him at like 6 a.m. when visiting hours come up. They let us go in and see him before he went to bed. And it was weird. Like, he has all these tubes and stuff coming out of him. And he's, still on a breathing machine just because of, letting his body rest and stuff. Yeah. But I knew he was okay. And so I kissed him, said, I'd see you in the morning. So the next morning we get up and we get there at 6 and there's all these doctors around him. And we were like, what's going on? And they're like, Mr. Myers didn't have a good night. We were like, what happened? Pretty much his body started shutting down. What? He went into acidosis. So kidney function gone. His pancreas shut down. Everything was shutting down. Mm-hmm. So they had to put him on an aortic pump to pump his heart.
Oh, wow.
They put him on dialysis, like pretty much nonstop. They put him on crazy amounts of insulin. Pretty much they
were doing everything they could to keep him alive.
Put his body, machines were working for his body to keep his brain active. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, so that was hard. And I just remember just crying and just, Mom was being strong, but I broke down. Cause that's my dad, I'm like, I was daddy's girl. And, so we go in the waiting room. We don't leave at all. Our pastor comes by and he was like, we've got money for y'all to stay. Cause Methodist is connected to a Marriott. Mm-hmm. And so, they paid for us to stay there so we didn't have to leave him. He was on life support for like almost a full week. Oof. Yeah. We walked in one point and he was, tied to his bed. I can't think of the word, not handcuffed, but like restraints. Okay. We're like, why does he have restraints? Well, he hit a nurse. We're like, how does he hit a nurse? He's not conscious. And so later on talking to him, which I'll get to in a minute, but so he had to be restrained because he could hear things. And whenever I would talk to him, I'd be like, I love you. And I squeeze his hand 3 times for I love you. And so he would squeeze it back. So I knew he was still with me, And I was like, open your eyes for me. Let me see your eyes. And he'd open them and look at me and then he'd close them. For my mom, he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, but he did it all for me, you know? Yeah. And so that was really tough. I was, trying to go through school, but living at the hospital. Like, I had never spent so much time at a hospital.
And how long did this endeavor go?
He was in the hospital for almost a month.
Oh, wow.
What happened was when his body was shutting down, he was too critical to move. And he was a big guy, so bed sores happen when you can't move.
Oh, yeah.
So what happened is what we thought was just a little one opened up to be like a gallon-sized one, like right above his butt area.
Oh, gosh.
So that was what we had to deal with after the heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
I had finals, and as soon as my final was over, I went back to the hospital because they were taking him off life support. They were waking him up. And so it was so funny because he's sitting there, and he was like, when's the surgery? We were like, dude, you had the surgery.
Wow. And
he looks down. He's like, huh. Like he didn't even realize he went through all that, So, but we were talking about it later on, and he knew kind of what was going on with everyone around him, like in the beds. He said he remembers seeing a bed and doctors all around. There was a woman in a bed next to it whose thing kept beeping. And we were like, Dad, that was you with all the doctors around you. He's like, really? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I heard my dad, my grandfather.
Wow.
And, my grandfather told me it wasn't his time yet, that he's not ready. It's not his time to die. Mm-hmm. And so hearing these stories from my dad, that is just crazy.
It is, to think about what he went through, and for him to have like that out of body experience, to be able to see what was going on in his life, or
the doctor said that
even though it was he thought it was somebody else's, was actually his.
They said that about 30 more minutes and he would have been gone.
Wow. Had
they not stepped in and started taking care of it.
I think there is a part of us that when stuff goes awry,
looking back,
you just focus on the task.
Looking back, I'm like, I was kind of strong. I mean, I did go through a lot, but I didn't think of it like that at the time. I just knew I had to get it done in order to see him, And so my professors were great. I told them what was going on. And so they let me, like, one class teacher was like, if you don't do the final, you still have like an A. I was like, wow. Done. Count me out, I
don't even want to take your final anyways.
So they worked with me very well, but I just remember when I went and saw him after he told him that he already had the surgery and stuff. I'm like, Dad, you look so good. And he just looks at me and he just flips me off. I'm like, oh, what? He's still there. It's my same dad, because that's just how the relationship we had, Yeah, because he was like, he knew he didn't feel good. And like, so he was in the hospital for a month dealing with the bed sore ulcer. I mean, it went down to like his hip bone, like it was that big. Like, wow. So they had given him so much medication for everything that he went in for an appointment. I guess he was already home, and they're in the parking garage, and he collapsed. And my uncle, who is not a very big dude, is trying to catch my dad. I'm at school when all this happens. And so, of course, they, code blue parking garage, code blue or whatever. They get him up. I'm at school. Mom tells me what happened. She's like, finish your class. Everything's fine. Just come back. I'm like, okay. So I go up there, and I'm sitting there talking with him. He's facing me, so his back is to the monitors. And I'm looking at the monitors. I'm like, that's not right. There's no way. It was reading 50/30.
Wow.
And I'm like, how are you feeling, Dad? He's like, well, I'm just, a little sweaty, a little weird. And then all of a sudden, all these doctors come in.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm like, son of a bitch, I'm the angel of death. He had the heart attack with me and now this with me. And luckily, it wasn't a heart attack. He was just over-medicated. So they had to get all that taken care of.
Oh, my goodness.
But I'm like, for real? Twice? I'm like, I'm not going to come see him anymore.
That is scary. So that 23, that was your whole year of life, just worrying perpetually about your father.
Once he had to use a wound vac. So it's like this thing that's hooked up to you and it just sucks all the bad stuff out.
That sounds nasty.
It was gross. But what's so funny is Like if he had, like when he had to go back to the hospital or whatever, for some reason the nurses couldn't figure out how to do it. And so Parker is like 3, 4. And he's trying to tell him, you got to take this part, because he was fascinated with it. Whenever the home nurse came to change it for my dad, he was fascinated. He's like, you need to take this, then you put the tube here. But they wouldn't listen to him because, I mean, he's 4. But when someone who knew what they were doing came in to show the nurses, they're like, oh, he was right, you know? Yeah. So after that, he, you know, had his surgery to close up. Doctor was like, 2 weeks of, taking it easy and you'll be fine. Have the surgery. Doctor comes in, 30 days of no bending at the knees or the waist. My mom was like, how the hell are we supposed to get him home?
How is he supposed to sit?
Oh, I guess an ambulance. They're like, 30 days? He's like, 30 days. 30 days. So he had to be
bedridden for 30 days?
Completely.
Oh my God. So did he have more bed sores?
No, because luckily he could roll. They were like, how does he turn? Well, he can roll from one side to the other on his stomach. Wow. Completely bedridden.
Couldn't use the restroom?
Nope.
Did he have a catheter?
Nope. He had my mom.
Oh my God. That is till death do us part right
Seriously,
there.
sickness and in health right there. Yeah.
High five you on that. We
seriously, right? And they're still kicking, I mean, God. But it's just what you do for who you love. Yeah.
That is insane. So
but now
he's stay for 30 days. 30, like that's a huge. I'm still trying to comprehend. Like you cannot physically move. You can't sit. You can't get up. You can't do. You're like the grandparents from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yes, that's exactly what it was like. We would have a chair next to the bed, and we would sit because he could roll and look at TV and stuff, and you just sit and hang out with him in bed.
But you also have to think about like the be able to have the control on yourself to not do that, because if you do that, you could possibly hurt yourself even worse. Yeah, just because you wanted to get up to do something. Yeah.
Luckily, he had very good self-control when it comes to that, because he knew that he would, F it up. But he said the only thing that really saved him is right before he had surgery, they bought a Tempur-Pedic bed. He's like, that's the only thing that saved me, is being comfortable like that. Because if it was a regular mattress, he wouldn't have
lasted.
Crazy, right?
That is insane, because if you really, like, if something happened, like, and you had to move him, who is your mom supposed to call? Because it's just you.
The fire department.
And then, he would have to call the fire department for them to come and put him underneath a plastic tarp to move him.
Because he couldn't have done it himself. And that would have been whether he was huge or thin. Like, he would, no matter what, they would have to have someone come and help him.
How do you feel like that shaped y'all as a family? Like, overall through the experience?
I think just, I saw them every day. We would always be together. And I remember me and my dad sitting there. He got into NASCAR during that time. Because that was pretty much, what else is he going to watch,
What else are you going to do? It wasn't football season. It wasn't baseball season. Yeah.
And so we would just sit and watch NASCAR and bullshit about it. And I was like, you know what? And for his birthday, I wrote him a card. I was like, I want to go to a race with you. And so we did. We went to a NASCAR race together up in Dallas. Tear to my eye. Yeah. And so it was like, that was one of the things I was like, that's what I want to do. That's my goal, is to do that with you. So it was just me and him. Parker stayed home with my mom. And we went for a couple of days, went to the race, and just had a good time, you know?
Is beautiful.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, my mom needed help with work, so I would help with that. And so we got to spend time doing that together. And Parker, it was because, when he had the wound vac, he was still kind of weak, but the doctor's like, you've got to get up and walk around, even if it's just around the house. So Parker would follow him with his wound vac, like holding the machine on his shoulder. And my dad had to wear like hospital gowns because of where everything was. Yeah. And I just remember hearing, I see your honey, I see your honey, as they walked around the house.
Wow. All right, guys, we're going to take a break right here and we'll come right back. All right, guys, we are back. Sorry about that. We had to take a small break, but we are back. So we finished up our story with your father coming out of everything, and y'all coming back and rekindling as a family and getting even closer than you already were. But then you shared with me that you yourself had an accident. Could you share with us what that accident was?
Yeah, it was a car accident. last day of school with my students, went to go grab some McDonald's for lunch. And on the way back, an 18-year-old girl, I guess, was texting and ran her stop sign. And I didn't even get a chance to, like, I don't think I slammed on my brakes. I think I was on my way to, or maybe I did. I don't even know. But I hit her. I T-boned her and spun around, hit her again, you know, and I stopped, like, in the opposite direction of where I was.
So you stopped with ongoing traffic coming towards you.
Yeah. Luckily, it was not a crazy busy street, you know. And so I didn't know anything was really wrong. I was shaken up big time and pretty hysterical. I mean, like, the airbags popped out.
Let's slow down for a second. So like, what's the first, okay, so you're driving, you're going down the street and you see the car like pull out. Is it like a slow reaction? Are you immediately like, what is this car doing? Like,
it was really, I think I was looking at my speedometer and looked up and hit her. Like, I didn't even get a time to react.
There was no.
The only thing I remember actually doing on impact was, for some reason, I let go of the steering wheel and I turned my head just a little bit to the right and it was like, oh shit, as I was spinning. Yeah. And so when the airbag came out at that time, it just hit me in the eye. Oh. So I had a black eye, but I didn't have a broken nose that you could get with it. Yes. You know?
Because if you hit it wrong too,
it could F you up, man. Yeah. And so, and then the letting go of the steering wheel kept my arms from breaking. Because had I held on and braced for impact, they both would have broken. Because that's how hard I hit. Because I was going probably about 40 when I hit her and didn't even.
And she was going standstill kind of thing?
She had pulled out, so she was going maybe a couple miles an hour. Yeah. So she was fine, though, because it hit on her passenger side. No one was with her. But I hit her head on. And so apparently, from the force, I guess I was trying to brake because it pushed my right foot up into my leg pretty much. And so off of it, like when you looked at my foot, it was kind of off center, like to the right of my leg. Sounds horrible.
Like no bones popping out or anything?
No bones popping out, but you could tell it was fucked up, you know? And I couldn't feel the pain because of all the adrenaline, you know? And so I remember a bystander who stopped to come help me. And I was like, I gotta call the school. That's the first thing I thought of. I need to call my school because I'm going back. My kids are at lunch. Someone needs to get them.
That is the anxiety of being a teacher.
Oh my God.
You never think about yourself.
Yeah. So I had one person call in the school. And then I was like, I need to call my husband because he had just flown in that morning from Vegas because we were moving out to Vegas that weekend. So this is a Thursday. And so I was like, I have to call him. And before we called him, the fire department came. So they're right down the street, like not even a mile away. And so they're talking to me. It's like, I have to call my husband. And so I give him my phone. I was like, it's under pumpkin. Because that's what I have it saved as.
So are the guys like your door's fine, like your car's fine, like they're able to open it, or
the
when
door's
you saw
open and I'm sitting
where you're like, oh my God, you're handsome. Like,
actually, no shit, they were hot. Not gonna lie, that part is true. They were hot, and so I'm sitting there. The door's open because I opened the door. You know, when the bystander came. I mean, because I wasn't like knocked out or anything. Yeah. But I noticed my leg, the one that was hurt, kept shaking. You know, it was just like spazzing. And I just thought adrenaline, you know, because it didn't hurt. And so they come, they're talking to me, and I'm like, call my husband, Pumpkin. It's like, his name's Dave. So they call Dave, and they're like, hey, you know, this is so-and-so from the Houston Fire Department. Your wife's been in an accident, and we're going to take her out to Memorial Hermann at the Med Center. You should meet us out there. She's like, she's fine. And he could hear me screaming in the background because I was flipping out. So he was like, I knew you were okay when I heard you scream when I was talking to the fire department.
What were you screaming about? Like, were you like in pain? Were you just yelling at the driver?
I was,
yelling
you
at
know,
the moment?
I think it was just the moment. And I don't even know if I'm sure I was saying things like, but I don't even know. Like, it's one of those things, like, I have no idea. Like, some things I remember vividly. I remember them putting the collar around my neck. I remember them trying to get me out with the backboard. And I'm like, oh my God, don't drop me. You're going to drop me. They're like, ma'am, we got you. We've never dropped anyone before, you know? putting me on the stretcher. I remember I could hear them talking about the girl and her saying something like needing a ride to the hospital too. I was like, she is not getting in my ambulance, you know? She did this to me. Things like that I remember, but I don't remember what I was screaming
about at that moment
that Dave heard on the phone.
When you got out, did you get out of the car? You said you opened.
I did not by myself. No, okay. I stayed. I couldn't get out.
You just opened it to let the guy come help you.
Yeah, because I didn't even think about rolling the window out. I just opened it. So my school nurse came to the scene because it was like literally like 3 or 4 blocks away from the school. Oh, wow. She came, and then the school like registrar or whatever, he came. And he took all the pictures for me. Mm-hmm. She rode with me to the hospital.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's nice.
Yeah, she was great. And so I remember in the ambulance, I looked down and I had these really cute shoes on. Like, and they weren't cheap. They were like, over $100, which isn't a whole lot, but to me it was, and they were super cute. And so I see the guy at my ankle with scissors. I'm like, what you doing? And he was like, well, I need to take your shoe off. I was like, no, sir.
You're not going to cut my shoe?
I was like, you are not cutting my shoe off. He's like, ma'am, it's going to hurt. I was like, I will take it. I can handle it. You're not taking my shoe off. Do not cut it. And so he took it off, and I don't remember pain. I don't remember anything. But Nurse Helm, she had my shoes, and she's like, I guarded those until your mom and Dave came. Like, I made sure no one took your shoes. So I get to the hospital. And my mom meets me up there with Dave, and she works for an orthopedic surgeon at Methodist in Sugar Land. Mm-hmm. And so they took x-rays and stuff, and she took a picture of it, sent it to her doctor, and he's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. Because he does knees, he's shoulders, things like that. He's like, that's way out of my league. I can't. And so I knew it was pretty ugly. She said that, my foot was turning blue because it was losing,
oh my goodness,
blood flow. So they had to set it in the ER.
And so what was that like?
Oh, my God.
When you say set it, we got to pop it back in place kind of thing? Or,
yeah.
Oh, so
they gave me medication that was supposed to put me in a twilight. Mm-hmm. It did not put me in a twilight.
They didn't wait long enough. They probably couldn't wait.
No, because of the blood flow. Yeah. So I remember hearing it.
Did they hold you down? Were they grabbing you?
Yeah. I had some people hold me down, and then 2 people popping it back in place. Oof. And I screamed. I've screamed like I have never screamed before. And Dave and my mom were rooms away, and they could hear me. It was that bad. And they're like, you didn't feel anything? I'm like, yes, I did. I'm crying and yelling.
You
yes.
didn't feel anything?
I'm like, oh my God, I felt every damn thing, people. And so then I ended up having emergency surgery that night. They were like, how do you feel about your pants? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, can we cut those off? I was like,
and we got to ask her to cut off everything now, guys.
I was like, cut away. You can take the pants. I don't care.
Everything she bought is worth more than you think.
Take the pants, just not the shoes. And so they put an external fixator, which is where you see the rods coming out of your leg. I had 2 rods sticking out of my shin.
That's gotta feel weird.
It was weird. It was odd. And
so because it passes through and comes out the other side, that kind of thing?
Through my heel.
Yeah.
It went through my heel to stabilize. And then it had 2 rods in my shin. And then it had bars connecting the rods. So it was made like a triangle. Oh. So it didn't go through my whole leg, just into the bone. And what's so funny, okay, so I was in the trauma floor at Memorial. I was like 6 days in the hospital. I don't know why I was there that long, but I was.
Yeah.
And Dave, we were talking. Dave's like, it's like everyone has to be hot to work here. I was like, right? The nurses were hot. The doctors were hot.
This is the big takeaway you took from that.
Yeah. I was like, and he's like, I know which doctor you think's cute. I was like, oh, you do not. He's like, oh, you flirt so bad. So I finally get to go home, and I'm no house because we had to move out of our apartment. So I'm back at my parents' house, and we tried laying in my bed, but I couldn't get my leg high enough to elevate because I had to get all the swelling down before they could do the second surgery. And so I'm on their couch for 3 weeks. That's where
your dad's walking by. See, this is how I felt. You see how I feel?
Yeah.
How you feel? You want to watch NASCAR?
So it was was able to stay for a couple of days, but then him and Parker had to drive all our stuff to the house in Vegas, you know?
So he had to go.
And I had to stay.
And so you were back home for how long before you got to get with him?
About a month and a half.
Then you were able to have that second surgery by then too?
Yeah. That all happened during that time. But like before Dave left, you know, I'm finally, you know, like you have all this may be a TMI, but you have all this pain meds and stuff and you get a little constipated, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was like, oh no, it's time, you know?
And nobody's around to help you?
No, they were there, but I did not want help in that area, you know? So I was like, babe, I just need help getting to the bathroom. Because I had to use a walker. I couldn't even use crutches. I had to use a walker.
Oh, no.
And he had to like help guide me, make sure I wouldn't fall and stuff. And he'd have to help me sit on the potty. And so I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'll call you when I need to get out of the bathroom. And so I do whatever I need to do. And then I tried to go and clean up afterwards. And I was like, I couldn't do it because you don't realize how much you move your ankle and stuff to get back there.
Oh my gosh.
And I just start crying. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to have to wipe my ass.
And how many years into marriage is this already?
Oh, it'd been 2007, 2014, 7 years.
7 years?
Yeah. But
still, yeah.
We don't even fart in front of each other. Okay. Even now, we still don't intentionally fart in front of each other.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah. So I was like, I'm crying. I'm like, Dave. And he comes in. I was like, I can't. He's like, you can't what? I was like, I can't wipe. And he's like, bend over, you know? And so he did it. Like, not even a second thought. He was just like, okay, let me do it. Man. And he helped me back to bed. Like, he helped me lay down. And then he, like, kissed me. Like, he really kissed me. Aww. And I was like, oh, you do love me after that, you know? Because I was like,
be amazing.
I'm like, how? Not something that you thought you'd be doing. I mean, maybe when you're old. Yeah. But not like.
And even then, he'd be like, stand back over there. Let me get the water hose.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, no problem. But like that whole situation really made me dependent on people. Like after Dave left, it was my dad's turn, you know? So I had a potty chair in the living room because it was so hard for me to get to the bathroom. Yeah. And, you know, do what needed to be done. So I'd be, you know, on my potty chair talking to Dad, just, you know, I'm like
in the living room.
Yeah, it was just, it was the easiest way. And he cleaned me up. I'm like, bet you thought you wouldn't be doing that again, did ya?
You're talking mess while he's cleaning.
He was like, honestly, I never thought I would. I'm like, yep, payback for when we took care of you. But, and see, I have such good memories from all that with my dad because it was just me and him during the day. And we watched Gossip Girl. Aww. We watched Vampire Diaries, you know, all those girly shows that we both got sucked into. And it was just a neat little time for us. Like, I have good memories of that, but it was so hard to, like, depend on people, you know?
But it worked out in your favor, right? Like, you were able to, I guess, let go of some of those things that we would never probably have to let go of until we're 60 for some of us, right?
Yeah. And like I couldn't wash my hair. My mom had to do that for me. I couldn't take a shower. I had to use washcloth, like adult, like bathing cloths. And
it had to be such a humbling experience.
Yeah. And then after the second surgery, like in the hospital, I was good. Like I had a nerve block and a morphine pump. So I'm like,
you were like clicking buttons left.
I had a clicker in each hand, you know? I'm like, oh, I got this, you know? And then the night before I'm discharged is when the nerve block stopped. I'm like, I don't got this. You know, it was the worst pain ever. Worse than them setting it. Because I had so much like hardware in my ankle, you know? But my dad, oh, God bless him. They sent me home with Percocet. And he, every 4 hours, woke me up to give me my Percocet. So I pretty much slept for 4 days. But he, like, every 4 hours, day or night, waking me up to give me that medicine, just because he knew how bad it was. It was awful. It was horrible.
So then, what was like what was the rehab like for that? Because I'm sure you had to learn how to walk again. Yeah,
I couldn't walk for almost 5 months, like no weight bearing. But when I got to Vegas, I found an foot and ankle doctor that was right by the house, and so he looked at everything. He's like, okay, in a couple of weeks, I want you to start therapy. And the problem is I have nerve damage too, because it pinched the nerve. So feeling and stuff, it was either no feeling or it felt like I was being poked by millions of pins.
There was no in between.
No, it was all or nothing. And so I would have to, they would get this metal rod looking thing. I forgot what it's called, but they would like put this cream all over my foot, which hurt so bad. But then they'd have to get this rod and just kind of rub it to kind of get feeling back in and stuff.
And aggressively rub it, not just rub it.
Oh, it was awful. And then they wanted me to try to pick up marbles with my toes. I'm like, I can't even feel my toes. How am I going to pick up a damn marble? I'm not even going to know if I have the marble because I can't feel.
That is such a funny thing. And
it took me like 2 hours to pick up one marble. But when I finally did it, like everyone at the PT place started cheering because it was just like one of those things that they could just tell I was struggling with. But I wasn't going to stop because I had to get that damn marble in the bowl, But it was like once I finally got the okay to walk, I was done. Like I didn't put a boot back on. I walked. I testing out driving to see how it was and stuff. And
You were fine by then?
I wasn't fine, but I wasn't going to go back into a boot. I was going to suck it up,
In hindsight, do you think you should have done it again? Or?
No, because I follow doctor's orders, and he said it was fine. He's like, if you start to hurt, put a boot on. And then I had to wear like a special like compression stocking because of swelling. But I wasn't going to go back. There was no way. Because it was like for 2 months, I'd go in for my checkup and he's like, yeah, I need to go another month, and I was like, oh my God.
So you just felt like it was perpetual. It was just going to keep going.
Yeah.
Keep
So
going.
I was like, when he said that boot can come off and you can put weight on,
So how long did this last? Like for with the surgeries, the physical therapy? It sounds like it took about 6 to 7, 8, maybe 6 to 8 months at least.
Yeah, it did. It was probably 8 months.
Wow.
And then I finally got to stop physical therapy. I still had stuff to do at home. But as painful as it was, I could tell the difference in feeling and stuff. I still have issues like getting a pedicure. I'm like, you can't touch here, you can't do that, but my issue now is, the screws have been in there for so long that I think one of them's starting to kind of pinch.
Oh, another nerve?
Not a nerve, but just pinch like the muscle. So it gets caught and I can't move my ankle.
Oh.
Yeah. So now we're like, okay, I may have to have another surgery to get stuff taken out.
So how many screws do you have in your ankle?
12 and a plate.
And a plate just to hold your foot together?
Right now, according to my doctor here, he says they're just hanging out there. They're not really doing anything. My ankle's healed. I don't know how that works with all that stuff in there.
Yeah.
But he said they're just pretty much hanging out inside my ankle. He's like, they're not doing anything, but because there's so much, he's like, I wouldn't take it out unless you're having issues.
So then what was like the effects, that the ripple effects of this accident? What kind of stuff did you, like, were you a dancer before and you had to stop dancing?
I mean, I wasn't a dancer, but I did like to, and like working out, I couldn't do certain things because of my range of motion, If I stand on it too long, it starts to swell. If I, sit down too much, it starts to swell. There's always some kind of pain when I walk, not like all day long, but every day there'll be a time where I'm like, oh, and I have to just kind of move it around and stretch it and stuff. And it's just it'll probably end up getting worse because I'm starting to develop arthritis a little bit.
And oh my goodness.
So and then so far he said it looks beautiful, but calcification will happen and may have to have a joint replacement.
Oh my goodness. All because of this 18-year-old girl.
Stupid girl.
Driving and texting and not paying attention to her surroundings.
Yep. Oh my gosh, make sure you have underinsured car insurance.
Underinsured?
Underinsured.
What is that?
It's to protect you from shit that I went through because she had minimal coverage. So my payout was not enough to cover anything. So underinsured people, underinsured.
So if they have just liability, you take another subcontract to make sure they pay for it.
I got a bill from the hospital for $48,000.
Oh my God. $48,000?
I laughed. I mean, that's all I could do. I'm like,
How do doctors get paid? Because who can pay that kind of money?
And that was after insurance.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Underinsured insurance, car insurance.
For all those people out there fighting for not universal basic health care, this is a main reason why. So a one accident could have, if you absolutely had to pay that bill, that's it. That's everything. Mm-hmm. There's no way that you can afford that. And that's one single accident. What about those people that have 3 or 4 accidents? Not because of them, but because of other people. Mm-hmm. They just have that run of luck. Mm-hmm. That's just insane. $48,000.
So yes, that's my takeaway from that is I learned to depend solely on people to take care of me. And then I learned that I need underinsured coverage.
But it's almost like you said, it's even though it was a heartache and it was painful, it was still somewhat of a blessing before in disguise, because you get to have these, when your dad was going through what he went through with his surgery, you got to spend that time with him and build those bonds with him. And then the reverse happened right before you left to go to Vegas to go to your new place to live. He got to spend a lot more quality time with you.
And he actually moved out to Vegas with us because I couldn't drive and Dave had to work. So I needed someone there with me in case I needed, to do whatever. And Ava started school, so I needed someone to get her to school because we were too close for the bus. And so he drove out there and moved out there with us until probably like September. Wow. And I moved in July. That's and it's so funny. It's so funny, like when I got to the house, because we had a 2-story house and all the bedrooms were up. So Dave had put our bedroom set up like in the dining room downstairs. And so that's where, like, we had our couches in there. We had a TV set up. I had my bed. And so that was our bedroom for a while. And finally I was like, you know what? I needed a shower. I hadn't had a good shower. I was like, I'm going to butt scoot up the stairs and I see how that goes. And so I did that okay. I scooted down fine. And I was like, we're moving upstairs, baby. We're going to our room. And so
but that's so hard, and I give you that the tip off for that, for being able to make all those life-changing changes, and being able to accommodate all that stuff for yourself. And then your husband putting all this stuff downstairs.
Yeah, no, comically. So sweet of him. He's so good. He's so thoughtful. Because I mean, how bad would it have sucked if he didn't even think about it and put everything upstairs? And then he's like,
how angry would you have been?
I would have tried not to be angry. I would have tried not to be like, dude, what the hell? But like, he thought of everything, and it was very sweet.
With your son, you shared a story with me about him coming out. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. So, right, I guess after he graduated high school, he called to let me know that he was bisexual. And I kind of took it hard, not necessarily to him, but like afterwards, I was just like, is this because I was a single mom for so long? What is it? And looking back, I know that's not it. Yeah. But
did you ever have any inkling when he was younger or anything like that?
I don't know.
In hindsight now,
looking back, yeah, probably. I'm sure. I mean, yes. Yes. But not that to the extent where I was, I just assumed he was gay. I was just, I don't know, me. So he told me that. And I remember I was like, crying. I was like, is this because of me? But I got over it and I was just like, it is what it is,
But how many other parents or how many other single moms have that same thought of like, is it just because I was a single mom? He didn't have any male influences, any positive male influence. But it sounds like, he had that. But
he had it. And that's part of the reason why I wasn't 100% blaming myself, because logically I knew he had the male figures there. Yeah. My dad, Dave, because he was 6 or 7 when Dave came into the picture. So, but it's always in the back of your mind if that does happen, And so I asked him, like, are you seeing someone? He's like, no, but I think, I felt this way for a while. I like, both girls and boys. So I was like, oh, okay, just be careful. I mean, I didn't know what to say. Yeah. He knew I still loved, I loved him, things like that. Right before he started school, he calls me again.
For college, right?
Yeah, right before he starts college at U of H, he's like, I'm about to start this new chapter of my life, and I want to do it, completely honest. He's like, I'm not bisexual, I am gay. I was like, okay. And I was like, I don't wish that on you, because,
Are you are you nervous about prejudice? Are you nervous about?
Well, I feel, and this is just me looking, like, but I feel like there can be a struggle when you are a gay or lesbian. I think it's not 100% easy. Looking back, it's not 100% easy for anyone, gay or straight. But just seeing things on the news. I just didn't want him to have to go through that, the prejudice and things like that. Mm-hmm. Looking back, we're in a society now where there's nothing weird or abnormal about it. It's just, it is what it is, and it's more accepted, Mm-hmm. And I was talking to him about it whenever, I was going to see if he minded if I talked about it here. Mm-hmm. And he was like, that's the one thing that kind of not hurt him, but shocked him, is when I said that. And so I felt like I explained, I was like, I don't want you to think that I felt bad about what you told me. He's like, I didn't feel that. And he's like, I know it wasn't out of negative, a negative connotation. He's like, I don't know. He's like, I expected maybe a little bit more from you. And I was like, why? And I apologize. And I was like, I love you. And know that, it is what it is, and he was like, yeah. And he's like, and he's like, I'm over it too. It's not like I sit there and, think about it. But when he did tell me that, I was like, are you seeing anybody? And he's like, yeah, I've met a guy. I was like, okay. I was like, just be careful no matter what. And so me and him and his boyfriend and my mom all met for lunch, hung out, and got to know him. And
were you nervous? Were you excited?
A little bit. I think I was more nervous to see how they interacted with each other, and it was just like him sitting with a friend. Not that that's how it was in the relationship when I wasn't there, but in front of me, that's what it was like. So it made me feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And not that I wasn't, I don't know.
I mean, it is a touchy subject, and that's one of the reasons why I asked you to share it, because there's not a lot of people that are not willing to talk about it, but are willing to make that conversation uncomfortable as it is. Yeah. Because it's something that is different.
And I have friends who are, gay, and they're my friends, but it's different when it's your child telling you this. Yes. And especially when you don't think about that being the case.
Possibility.
Yeah. I expected him to marry a woman, have kids, things like that. And so now that whole image in my head is gone, And then we were talking about it in the car and the other day, and I was, I was like, you can still have kids and stuff. I still want to be a grandma. He's like, where am I going to get one of those? Just like the way he said it, I was like, you don't just get one, Parker. I was like, you can adopt, you can have a surrogate. And he's like, yeah, I've thought about things like that. And he's like, I'll do it eventually, but thank God he's not in a place that he wants to do it now. But I don't know. It was just,
it was part of, like, it sounds like it was, part of the struggle was letting go of the image you wanted to project.
Yeah. And then the image I want to project, the image of, being a grandma, I want to be a lovey one day. That's what I'm going to be called, by the way. Lovey.
Lovey?
Yeah.
It's cute.
But, and if it was up to Ava right now, she's in that stage where she's like, I'm never having kids. And I'm like, I need someone to give me a grandbaby one day, So it was what I appreciated is when he came he needed to tell my dad, and
oh my goodness, I didn't even think about that.
My mom was a different story. She was a little bit easier to talk to, but he was worried about my dad. I was like, well, I'm not doing it for you. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is your news, not your cross to bear, but this is just your news to share, not mine, And so my dad, took it well, and he was like, he told my mom, he's like, if anyone gives him shit about it, I'll kick their ass,
Wow.
So, I mean, it was just one of those, okay, you're gay, let's move on. It is what it is.
Nobody making a big deal of it. Nobody doing anything crazy.
I mean, we made sure he knew we loved him, and, he moved out to Colorado with his boyfriend. They're not together anymore, but they are still friends, and it is what it is, and that's just how it's going to be, and okay. I mean, I don't know if I handled it the best, but I know I didn't handle it as bad as it could be, you know? Like, I could have handled it a lot worse.
If you could go back, what would you tell you, or how would you have handled it differently?
I probably wouldn't have said what I said about I wouldn't wish this on anybody. I probably would have been like, I love you no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I did tell him I love him, but I didn't add that no matter what part, you know? And I think that, that's something that he needed to hear. And I wish I would have said that. Yeah. But he knows it. But I think we've done okay with it as a family. I think that, my husband told him, okay, I love you. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, that's pretty much just how we're going with it. It is what it is.
No, you don't want him to get looked at differently. You don't want him to be ostracized from groups just because of that. It is a whole different area of things that some of us aren't prepared to handle. Mm-hmm. I remember hearing one of our coworkers say that because I was talking to coworkers to the group, and on my Google feed at school for some reason it said, see how Google's helping black trans communities. Don't know why that came up. It just came up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, what is this? So I brought it up to the group. I was like, that's so weird that it just came up on my news feed. I mean, not even my news feed, just came up underneath the Google search box. And one of our coworkers shared like that they were out at a restaurant, and that they saw two men come in, and they were, they were lovers, and they were, they were a couple. They were a couple rather. And they were having, just like as much fun as you would with just your wife, just loving on each other, giving each other kisses and stuff like that. And she was perpetually scared of having them sit next to them because she was afraid to be able to have the conversation with her kids. Oh. Which it is. That is scary. But
that is a hard thing.
It is. But also, like, it's just love, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so weird how because she's so afraid to have the conversation to explain it to a kid, she was also hindering that conversation that needed to happen in one way. Does it mean it needed to happen at that age? Maybe you don't hope not, but that is our job as parents to have those conversations. And
before all this,
no matter how uncomfortable it is.
Yeah. Before all this, I had a friend who I have known my entire life, and I've only known her to date men, and she was married, had a baby. They didn't work. And so she kind of reconnected with a woman friend of hers, and they fell in love and got married. And Dave and I went to the wedding and stuff, but they came over, and Ava was like, so wait a minute, that's her wife? That's her wife? Yeah. I was like, yeah. And because Ava was younger at the time, and she hadn't been exposed to a whole lot of, gay people. And I was like, yeah, that's, they're married, they love each other. And so sometimes it's girls and girls, or boys and boys, or a girl and a boy, it's just, so having that conversation, she's like, oh, okay. And that was it. Like, I think parents with little ones who, like the coworker said that, she kind of, was scared to have this conversation, I think would be so surprised at how easy that conversation is, because the kid is just like,
a matter of fact.
Okay. And moves on,
There's no question of moral sin or ethics or anything like that.
And I was in the same boat, because I'm like, how am I going to explain this to her, But she was like, oh, okay, that was it. And I'm like, well, that was easier than I expected, And
kids are so matter of fact. That's just how kids are.
And so with Parker, she's like, oh, so that's his boyfriend? We're like, yeah. Okay. It's just, I think people would be surprised how easy it is to have that conversation with younger kids.
But that, like you said, coming back to in full circle about how nervous you were about, I don't wish that upon anybody, because people do have those simplistic thoughts of like, how do I do that? How am I? Now it's my problem to explain it to my kid. But it really isn't your problem. It's still just out there. Your kid's going to discover it.
Well, it's not even a problem.
Yeah.
It's it's a discussion. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it, Just
life.
Say what it is and just be done. Don't make a big deal about it. Because if you make a big deal, then the kid's going to make a big deal.
That is 100% true.
But if you're like, well, they love each other. Oh, okay. It's as simple as that. Don't make a huge deal about it. Don't go into what your beliefs are about it.
Oh, my goodness.
Let them come up with it on their own as they get older. Just basic facts. Those two men, they love each other. They are a couple. Done.
That's a great way to put it. I'm glad that you were able to put it that way.
Yeah.
I think with that, we'll finish up. Actually,
Okay.
I'm looking at what we were talking about, and so then, just like I always end with my guests, what is your life lesson that you can give to the audience?
Do not focus on your past, because if I focus on everything that happened in my past, I would not be a happy person. Just because if you focus on like, oh my God, I was a teenage pregnant, just don't focus on the past.
Mm-hmm.
The past is
Move
the past
forward.
for a reason, you know? Live in the moment, plan for the future, but don't go back. Don't go backwards, you know? I mean, life's going to hand you some shitty stuff, but don't let that define you. Don't let it hinder you. Pull your big girl panties up, deal with it, and then keep going forward.
Well, with that note, thank you for coming out. Thank
I'm
you for
so glad
sharing
I
your
came.
stories with us. And y'all guys, if y'all enjoyed it, hit that like and subscribe button down below. And I love and appreciate you coming out here. And until next time, guys, I'll see y'all guys later.
All right.
That's the end of the episode. Thank you guys for listening. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like and subscribe button down below to get the latest updates. Until then, see you guys next time.